Hey everyone, hope you're doing well today. Welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. This video is Lesson 85. We're going to cover pages 104 and 105 in our book today. The song, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. All right, well, welcome back. It's so good to have you with me here today, and we are getting closer and closer to finishing up this book. We are in the section of the book with really some of the nicest pieces in the entire book, and today's lesson is no exception. The only downside to today's lesson is this is a Christmas piece, and I'm recording it in February, so not feeling super Christmassy since it just passed a little while ago, but nevertheless, this is one of the finer arrangements, in my opinion, in this entire book. It makes for a great recital piece, a great concert piece. I actually had a student of mine perform this in a Christmas recital that we did back in December. So I do recommend that not only you learn this piece any time of the year, really, just for learning purposes, but I do recommend if you're looking for some nice beginning Christmas music, this is a great arrangement. All right, so let's start looking here at page 104. And you notice there's a lot of pedal in this piece. As always, I'm going to save the pedaling for the very end. The piece is slow, so if you're familiar with this tune, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, it's a slower piece. So a lot of times slower can be easier because obviously, if you're working up something faster, you're going to have to work on it longer and longer so that you can go through all the notes and all the different layers and basically have your brain processing things at a much quicker pace. So slower is easier, but sometimes slower is harder because the slower you go, the more space there is between notes, the more exposed notes are. So there's that element to look at as well. So in the end, everything has its challenges. It's just a different type of challenge. So we start with, right hand in the treble clef, left hand in the bass clef, of course. We got 4/4 time, 4 beats in every measure. We've got a lot of eighth notes in this piece. So when you're counting, I do recommend 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You're going to want to break it down into halves, half a beat, because of all the eighth notes. So the melody is in the right hand. The hardest thing about this piece is going to be notation and fingering, which a lot of times fingering and notes work together. But there's been this trend at this point in the book that there's a lot of these pieces that have a lot of accidentals. We had that with our last lesson with the song Laura. And in this case, it's the same. Now, if you look at page 104, there actually are no sharps, no flats, except there's one G sharp I just noticed at the very bottom line, second measure. But that's it. And we are in the key of C major, by the way, so our key signature has no sharps and flats. But if you look over at page 105, this is where it gets tricky, these two lines. So even though it's only 2 lines of the entire piece, these are very tricky lines. There's a lot of sharps, flats, naturals. And if you look at the left hand, at the top of 105, look what happened with the left hand. It is also in the treble clef. But when we look at that line in just a moment, I'm going to show you a trick that I think will make it actually a lot easier to learn. A very useful trick. There's a pattern that's in play there. And again, I think that's going to make things a lot easier. But I'm going to start with the right hand because the right hand's the melody. And we're going to start with our thumb on middle C. But if you notice right off the bat, we've got 2 going to E, 3 to G, and that's going to put 5, our pinky finger, up on the high C. In the book, they previously labeled this the extended C position, or just extended position. And the reason for that is you're skipping keys on the piano, but you're not skipping fingers. The only finger we're skipping is our 4th finger. So when you start this piece, you don't want to just necessarily have your right hand in this C5 finger position, which we were so used to for so long, but you really want to get it stretched into this position so that you have complete control over all four of those notes. And you notice the legato. There is a legato, a slur. So you're going to play it very smoothly. And to do that, you got to have a lot of control with your fingering. So having this layout at the beginning is going to be very beneficial. Now, when you get to the second measure, look what happens. The second finger, which was just on E, is going to jump over to G. And then your thumb's going to F, and they don't tell us, but that means your third finger is going to cross over the thumb to E. And then 2 on D, and then you're going to land with your thumb on middle C. And notice that those four notes are all eighth notes, so they're going to be a little bit faster. So that's 2 on G, thumb on F, cross to 3 on E. You might even want to put a 3 with your pencil over that E and even circle it. I like to circle when there's crossovers or cross unders to really get my attention. And then you got 2 on D, and then thumb on C. Then you're going back to 2 on D. Now the third measure is exactly the same as the first measure. Thumb on C, and you do the extended position, 2 to E, 3 on G, up to 5 on C. And then the last measure, you're going to have 2 and 3 on F and G. Remember, whenever you see notes that are diagonal, all notes are going to be vertical when you're playing 2 or more notes at the same time. But if they're diagonal, they're right next to each other. So if you look at F and G, right next to each other on the piano. Now, not next to each other necessarily like a white and a black key. That would be the case too, but you would see an accidental. But since there's no accidentals and we're in the key of C, it's just 2 white keys next to each other. Now that's a whole note, so you're going to hold that for a very long time, especially if you're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now when we go to the second line, it's similar to the first line, but not quite the same. You're going to have your thumb on E, extend to 2 on G, and then this is tricky. You're going to extend to 4 on C, and then 5 on E. Now, my hand's small, so the 4 on C to 5 on E, I can do that because, I've exercised it for so many years, but that's a hard stretch. I wouldn't expect anyone to necessarily get that right away. So don't feel like you have to stretch all the way. Mind, you're also going to have pedal later on to hold things and sustain things, right? So when you hit this 4 on C, don't be afraid to lift off of it and move to the E. Because when I add pedal, it's going to smooth everything out. So my foot's down, and I'll show the pedal camera later on in the video when we actually dig into the pedal. But the C's still holding when I lift it. And that enables me to comfortably get over to the E. So in this case, the pedal really helps you there. Don't feel like you have to, be perfectly smooth with the fingering. Lift up so you have complete control on getting that 5 on E and let the pedal take care of the smoothness. In the second measure, you've got thumb on A and 4 on D. So you just came off of this in the first measure, and then you got to be ready to land right there on the A and D. But then it's 4 eighth notes, so you got to be ready to move. So you're going to go to 3 on C, 2 on B, thumb on A. You got a big crossover, not 3, but 4 to G. You might want to circle that 4. Again, I like circling because it lets me know there's a big crossover or cross under. So once again, the A and the D to C, B, A, and cross over to 4, not 3, but 4 on G. Then you got 3 on F. And our third measure, those are 2 notes right next to each other, D and E, with 1 and 2. And then the last measure, we've got F and G again. Unlike earlier in the piece, F and G is going to be played with 3 and 4, just because those are the 2 fingers that are right there. Now, the third line is a duplicate of the first line. So all this is the same. Thumb on C, extended position, 2 on E, 3 on G, 5 on C. And then we got our 4 eighth notes. We got 2 on G, F cross to 3 on E, 2 on D, land on middle C, D, and then measure 3, We do it again. C, extend to E, G, all the way up to C, and our last measure, F and G. Now here's what I find interesting about this bottom line. The bottom line is very similar to the second line. Now the first measure is exactly the same. The second measure is almost the same, but the first half of the second measure is the same. Now you note the fingering, which is very interesting. We're coming off of F and G at the end of the third line. They have us going to the second finger on E. That doesn't make any sense to me, because look at the top line. You have F and G at the end of the top line, 2 and 3. And then they had you go into the thumb on E on the second line. Perfect sense, makes perfect sense. And then, when you landed on the second measure, 1 and 4 on the A and D. So I don't get what they're doing here. I mean, you're going to a G sharp eventually, but that should not affect the fingering in the first measure. So here's what I did in my music. At the end of the third line, you got F and G, 2 and 3. Just go to the thumb again. Do the same thing as they have on the second line. Go to thumb on E, 2 on G, 4 on the C, and then 5 on the E. Now, even though they had the 4 on the C, and I did not mention this earlier, you could go 1 on E, 2 on G, 3 on C, and 5 on E. So the C in the bottom line and on the second line could be with the third or the fourth finger. So that's another option. If 4 to 5 feels like it's just not working for you, you could do 3 to 5. Now, this is a big stretch here, but you're dealing with bigger, stronger fingers. So that could work too. In the end, I actually like the 4, so I personally will go with 4. When you go to the second measure in the bottom line, you're still going to end up with A and D with 1 and 4. So make note of that. Do the exact same fingering on the bottom line that they have for the second line, because nothing's different there. So going back to the second measure on the bottom line, these 4 eighth notes are the same. 1 and 4 on the A and D, and then 3 on C, 2 on B, thumb on A. Now here it's different. On the second line, you had a big cross to 4 on G. Here you're going to 2 on G sharp. And that means you're going to want to do 4 on B. And then that sets you up perfectly for 1 and 5 in the next measure on E and C. That E and C you see is tied. Both of them are tied for a total of 6 counts. So you're going to be holding this 2 counts into the last measure. In the last 2 counts, the 2 quarter notes, you have 1 on E, which you're already there. And you're going to play that C again, but you got to do it with the third finger. And the pedal again will help connect it. So don't feel like you have to stretch like this. You certainly can, but if you lift and you've got pedal down, it's fine. So the reason for the 3 on C, if you look at the top of page 105, it sets you up perfectly for 5 on E. And you've got 3 of them, 3 quarter notes. Then we got 2 eighth notes, a D and a C with 4 and 3. Next measure is going to put 2 on B, back to 3 on C, back to 4 on D. And that is a half note on beats 2 and 3. And then we've got eighth notes again. The last 2 eighth notes of measure 2 is a C and a B. Putting our thumb on A in the third measure, back to B, and then C. So you see it's the same rhythm again. The half note on beats 2 and 3. But then we only have a quarter note on beat 4, and that's a B. And then the last measure, we hit that B again and just hold it for 4 counts. Now, when you get to the third line, your hand's going to jump. There's no smooth transition except the pedal will, like I said, connect things. You're going to have to jump down to E and C. thumb on the E, 5 on the C. Now, this is two-part writing. You've got stems going up and stems going down. The half notes are the stems going down. So you're going to be holding a half note for 2 counts while you're playing the 2 quarter notes above it. So it's like this. See what I did? That's called two-part writing. It's almost like you have 2 instruments in an orchestra. You've got like, let's say a viola holding up here and the violin is playing up here. Two-part writing. It creates this nice layer. On beat 3, you've got a D sharp with your thumb and a C with the 5th finger. That D sharp is also a half note. So you're going to hold that down while you play these 2 eighth notes, B and A. And that's with 4 and 3. So in the next measure, that brings us to 2 on G, 3 on A, G and B together for a half note. That's 2 and 4. And then on our eighth notes, you're going to bring that thumb up to G and then 2 on A. Now in the third measure, you've got G and B once again, but this is with 1 on G and 3 on B. And then 2 and 4. So here's some fancy finger work here. And then the half note, B and D, is going to be 3 and 5. So you're working all your fingers. And that's probably not going to come easy right away. There may be a temptation to seek out some other fingering. Don't do it. I recommend you definitely stick with that fingering. It's just a matter of exercising your fingers, making them stronger. Because if you can get all your fingers to do that, you can create a very smooth spot there in the music. If you're doing like 1 and 3 and just picking it up, you'll never ever get it smooth. Even with the pedal, because the way the fingers work when they jump from key to key, it becomes very percussive. Because you even with the pedal down, it's just the way the keys are struck that way. But when you do it with the fingers here, you can really dig in a little bit more, and you just get a smoother, meatier sound. So really, really work on that if your fingers are feeling weak and can't do that. On beat 4, you're going to bring your thumb down to D. So it's a big jump, but again, pedaling will help. And then whatever fingers are on that F natural and G natural, mine are 3 and 4, just go ahead and do. It can be 4 and 5. It can be 2 and 3. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, because where you go next, it won't matter. The reason there's an F natural is because if you look in your left hand, at the end of measure 3, you had an F sharp. So you even though you didn't play F sharps in the right hand, you were playing some F sharps in the left hand, and they're just being helpful and just reminding us, saying, no, we're not playing all F sharps now. So just a reminder, this one's an F natural. When you get to the third line, you're repeating the beginning of the song. It's the same. So we've got C, and then the extended position to E, G, and up to C. And then our eighth notes, make sure it's 2 on G, cross to 3 on E, land on middle C, D, and then the third measure, extended position again, C, 2 on E, 3 on G, up to C, land on F and G. Now, this is different. So if you compare the fourth line here to the second line on page 104, it starts out the same. And remember on page 104, I said, the fingering at the bottom made no sense to change because going into the second measure was the same. But look at the fourth measure on page 105. Going into the second measure is different because on page 104, we had E, G, C, E, and then we had A and D. But the notes on page 105 on the fourth line are E, G, C, E, and we got to get up to F. It goes up to F. So you see, I can't go from 5 to 5. Not smoothly anyways. So this makes sense to me. why they would change this fingering. And you pretty much do have to move to 2 on the E to get this going, not the thumb. But again, if you're worried about making that part smooth, you've got pedals. So, but it's also the start of a new phrase. You see, there's a new slur beginning there. So if you have a tiny little breath, a tiny little break in the music between the end of the 3rd line and beginning of the 4th line, that's okay, because it's like you just finished a sentence. Even the words, through the years we all will be together if the fates allow, period. So it's like a breath, new sentence. And then the 4th line starts our new sentence. So you got 2 on E, and then this is the big one. You're going to circle this. You want your thumb to come under to G. And then you got 2 on C. You want 4 on E, and now we can comfortably get 5 on the F. And these running 8th notes are just right down your scale. F, E, D, C, and then your thumb lands on B. And then the 4th beat is another quarter note, D with the 3rd finger. And then you're right there, your 2nd and 4th finger are highlighting C and E. And that is tied for a total of 7 counts. When you get to the end of the 4th line, you still got an E, but you got to move your 5th finger to that E. Now, heads up on the fingering here at the bottom line. They got 2, 3, and 5. This is an A minor chord, A, C, and E. They have 2, 3, and 5. And the reason for that is, look at your very next note, an F. You need your thumb for the F. So you've got, now when we look at both hands, it's not an A minor chord. That's for another lesson, that's theory. But this by itself is an A minor chord, just the A, C, and E. But the most important thing is don't do 1, 3, 5, which is our traditional fingering for a chord of 3 notes, a triad, but 2, 3, 5, so your thumb can come down to F. Now in beats 3 and 4, you're going to play the A again with 2 and the C again with 3. Now all these notes in this measure, the A, C, and E, and the F, that's what this roll is on the beginning of the 2nd line. Now, before we do the roll, you want to make sure you get all 4 notes together. Okay? You want to actually play the whole measure with all the rhythm, all the fingering, all the notes before you put the roll in. So basically it's 1 and 2 and. And by the way, that's just coming right down the 8th notes. So E, think about E as your top note here with the 5th finger, and then down to D, down to C, down to B. You're going to move your thumb to A here. So, I mean, you have to, because you're going to run out of fingers. So there's the thumb on A, and then squeeze that 4 into B. Now, once you have it with the rhythm, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now you can work on the roll. Now we're going to take it out of rhythm to do this. Now the way the roll is, it depends on the nature of the song. This is a slower song, a prettier song, smoother. So it doesn't need to be a super fast roll. But a roll is still a roll. It still has to have movement. It can't feel like you're playing like, it can't be like, 8th notes or even 16th notes, which we haven't learned yet. But it has to feel like a roll. You have to have that feeling for sure. So that being said, remember rolls are still even. Now I'm going to slow it way down. So you may need to play this for a while like it is 4 8th notes. Because you want to make sure it's even in volume. All 4 notes are equal volume. Even in rhythm. You don't want it to be a mixed rhythm. Now everything is leaning to the E. The E is your melody note. If I played these first 2 measures, I don't need this whole roll. All I need is that E. So in other words, right here, you hear it? That E is the melody. So with most rolls, you're aiming for that E. You're going to make that E a little bit louder perhaps than the other notes in it because it is melody note. Got it? So when you're working on the rolls again, make sure, one, all 4 notes are even in rhythm. All 4 notes are even in volume, although the E, like I said, could be a little bit louder. And you can hold it a little bit longer because these notes in the beginning of the roll are actually going to go by a little bit faster, even though it's only an 8th note. And then you have to be relaxed, and that's the hard part, not being stiff. Because if you're stiff, it's going to come across that way. And the whole point of a roll is just this very relaxed, easy feeling. Now you can roll the wrist, rotate the wrist a little bit, make like a little semicircle if that helps. But you have to keep your wrist relaxed. You have to keep the palm of your hand relaxed. You have to really soften this part of the hand. If this is stiff, you're not going to have that relaxed movement. And of course, your fingers can't be locked either. So I still have my curved fingers. This is a stretch for sure, but I'm allowing a little bit of rotation with the wrists. Even my forearm and elbow are getting into it. But I leave it up to you how much. I mean, I can do it now without this, but I still can hear the difference. If I'm not moving my wrist, my forearm, my elbow, and I'm only working on the fingers, I can hear that it's a little more stiff in the sound. And it makes sense because I am a little more stiff in my motion. I'm starting to stiffen up and not relax everything. So it makes sense, right? I mean, totally makes sense. It's just hard to do, and that takes time. And there hasn't been a whole lot of rolls in this book. So, and if you don't perfect it yet, that is okay. You still don't need to be at the point where you're perfecting rolls. Honestly, by the time you get to the end of level 3, which at the end of level 3 of this series, as far as I'm concerned, if you can make it to level 3, you are a pianist. Because at the end of level 3, there's Beethoven's Fur-Elise and Moonlight Sonata. I mean, in their original form, not what's the word I'm looking for? Not simplified. They're not easy arrangements. They are the actual pieces. And that's why at that point, I'm just like, you are a pianist. Now, that doesn't mean like you're a Carnegie Hall pianist and you're accompanying every instrumentalist out there. I'm just meaning like you are a good pianist. Like you can go out and play good pieces. You could give some of your own concerts and things for people, and it's good music. But I digress. My point is, at that point, yes, you need to master the role. And you'll have plenty of opportunities to do that between now and then. But of course, the sooner you work on it and the better you get now, the easier it'll become later on. So, the other thing about the role, which I've mentioned, is there's 2 ways really to play a role. Now, some people, and I think the book addressed it, is, and I'll include the left hand here, that you start the roll right on beat 1. But I never liked that because, again, see, the roll is decoration. It's not necessary. It's just that E. That's the important note. This just adds decoration to it. Well, if we didn't have the roll, the E wouldn't come right after, right? It wouldn't. No, it'd come right on beat 1 with the left hand. So I personally like to start the roll before the beat, just before. That makes more sense to me because you're emphasizing the one note, that's the melody note, right on the beat, which would be there anyways. And it's just cleaner. It's just cleaner when this is all by itself and not, right in the middle of the left hand playing too. So when I put it all together, starting from the measure before, you see how that works. Now the pedal adds a little element of challenge too, which we'll get to later. All right, so that pretty much wraps up the roll there. Whoops. So you got to bring your 4th finger down to that B. And when you do that in the 3rd measure, it sets you up beautifully for E and C with 1 and 5. Okay, now the F and G in the next measure, probably 2 and 3. And then you've got one more roll here And I would probably hold those notes down, actually, since it's a whole note. Now, yes, your pedal will hold it down too, so you could technically lift. You could technically do that. Now, if that makes the roll better for you, then by all means do it. Feel free to lift your fingers. But your pedal is going to be sustaining those notes, so that's why you can. That's not melody, by the way, because your last word is the word now. So the last two measures of this piece is just basically like an extension of the music. So that D can actually almost be softer because you're just trailing away. If all three are equally soft, that's fine too. They have it at pianissimo, which is very quiet, very, very quiet. So to do a roll that quietly is not easy at all. Okay, but it's the same idea as earlier. All three notes equal in the rhythm, equal in the volume. Like I said, you could get a little softer if you wanted. That's fine. And relaxed. And you can rotate the wrists, move the arm more. You can do all of that. Now, we'll get to it later when we do hands together, but this one incorporates the left hand rolling too. You see you have two notes rolling in the left hand. So we'll get to that a little bit later. So that's going to be a different approach, slightly different approach than the earlier one. But when you're working on the right hand by itself, that is the exact same approach as earlier. But the timing of it won't come right on beat one. I'll go ahead and tell you why. Because the left hand is rolling too. So essentially all five notes are rolling. Because it's written like that. When you have a roll in the left hand and the right hand, then you roll all the notes starting at the bottom most note and coming up one at a time. And the measure two was different. That left hand isn't part of the roll. So that's a different approach. But here, when both hands are rolling, it's like one giant chord is what's being rolled. Then it's just all on beat. Then the roll can start on beat one. And there's nothing after it, so it's not going to like mess up any other notes too. So this is the very end of the song. Just nice roll. So let's get into the left hand, the very, very beginning. So we're starting with 5 on the low C. Now the left hand is mostly half notes, quarter notes. I think there's one measure of eighth notes. So more of your rhythm is going to be in your right hand. It's busier in the right hand. So you got 5 on C. And then you jump up to thumb on A. Now you would think 4 on D, but you need 5 on D in the next measure. And that's so you can get to F and A with 4 and 2. And then you're going to have your thumb on B. Third measure, 5 on E. You'll use 2 on A. And you're going to expand the hand to 5 and 1 on D and C. That is a seventh, not quite an octave. Now, you have a couple choices here on these two last notes. The G and the B. You can do 4 and 2. Now, if you do that, it's okay. Your pedaling is going to make it smooth. The reason why you might do 4 and 2 is because look at the second line. Middle C, and your thumb can be right there. Your other option, going back to the D and C, is just doing 1 and 2, which is easier movement. But then when you go to the second line, you're going to bring your thumb back up to C. It feels good. I like doing 4 and 2. I like doing that, and then I'm right there to make all this nice and smooth on the second line. So these are all quarter notes going into a half note. It's just going right down the C scale. C, B, A, G, and F. On beat 3 in the second measure, bring that thumb to B. Now the B is tied, and on beat 4 you come in with the 4 on D. So a little bit of layering going on there. Beat 3 we have the B, and you're going to add 4 on D on beat 4. And then in the third measure you've got 5 on C, thumb on G for beats 2 and 3, and then G on beat 4. Last measure, 4 on D, thumb on beats 2 and 3 on G again, and again on beat 4. And remember, we said the third line and the first line are the same, and this applies to both hands. So third line, we got 5 on C, thumb on A. Next measure, bring the 5 to D. They don't mention it this time, so you might have to mark the music to remember that. 4 and 2 on beat 3 to the F and A. Thumb on B. Third measure, 5 on E. 2 on the A. And then the last measure, expand the hand again. D and C with 5 and 1. And we'll do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do 4 and 2. Now, don't feel like you have to do this that I was doing. It's realistically going to be with the pedal like that, and you're going to lift and go to 4 and 2. So that's the G and the B, and that takes you right to thumb on middle C, the bottom line. So this is starting out like the second line. The first measure is the same. C, B, A, G. Now the second measure, we got F up to D, the D above middle C. And it feels like you should use 3 on the B, but we're not. We're going to do the 2 like they suggest. Back to thumb on D. In the third measure, you got 3 on A, thumb on C, C again, and then the last measure, 4 on G, thumb on C. Then you've got 2 beats of rest. That's a half rest there, beats 3 and 4. And then you see this treble clef sign. And that is a reminder that you are going to move that left hand up in the treble clef. So you're finishing up with your thumb on middle C. Now this is tricky because you're going to pretty much have to memorize this jump. Although in the margin there at page 104, you could write the letters in the margin there, F sharp and A, which is right here by the way. And you could, put F sharp with the third finger, A with the thumb. You could write some kind of notes, something there if you want to give you a heads up. But this is where you're going. Very odd. Totally different than anything that was on page 1. So you're going from thumb on middle C to the thumb up on A and 3 on the F sharp. So that's what you're aiming for. Practice this jump. And if you can do it with your eyes closed, you've mastered it. Because when you do it with your eyes open, it's already going to become much, much easier. Now, this is the part of the music, part of this piece that's probably the hardest. Let's go through the notes, and then I'm going to show you this trick I mentioned earlier. It's going to make it a lot easier. You've got 3 and 1 on F sharp and A. Now, the fingering here is going to be a little odd too. So if they don't, not always, and it's certainly not in this piece, because I've had to mention some fingering that they didn't mark. But generally, if they don't mark fingering, it's what I call logical fingering. Whatever fingers are next in line to play, those are the notes, those are the fingers you use. So if I've got 3 on F sharp and thumb on A, logically, I have 4 and 2 going to F natural and A flat. Right? But, and I'll explain all this in a moment, you could do the 1 and 3. And I'll explain why that might be useful in a moment. Yeah, there's pedaling. So pedaling is going to cover up pretty much anything. Pretty much. I mean, not always in this piece, but pretty much. Let's go on to the second measure. Now, the second measure is marked 1 and 3. That is E and G. So, if I look at the fingering, I have 2 options. I could do all 1 and 3, and I'm just going to go through this E and G from the beginning of the line. So, back to the F sharp and A. I've done F sharp and A, 1 and 3. I've done F and A flat. Actually, F is 3 and A flat's 1. I should say 3 and 1. And then E and G, 3 and 1. Or I could go 3 and 1 and then 2 and 4. Now, if I do 3 and 1, guess what? It's a bigger jump, right? It's a bigger jump. Again, it doesn't matter. You got pedal. So if you do all 3 and 1s, or do 3 and 1, 2 and 4, you're going to have to rely on pedal to make it smooth. Not that it has to be extra smooth. Your right hand has the melody, but it's soft for sure, and it needs to be somewhat smooth. So in the second measure, we're here on the E and G. Now, D sharp, F sharp. 2 and 4 is right there. But I could go 1 and 3. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because in the next measure, they've got 1 and 2. Well, there's a reason for that. No matter what you do, whether this D sharp and F sharp is 4 and 2 or 3 and 1, you got to go to 2 and 1 on the D natural, F natural. And the reason for that is the next two notes. That's a low note in the treble clef, and it's already tough enough that we're doing the left hand. But that low note is a G, and you got an F here. So you're playing D and F with 2 and 1. You're going to go to G and F. That's the interval of a seventh. Now, how did I know that's a G? Well, we know that one ledger line underneath the treble clef staff is middle C. So the beginning of the third measure, we had D and F, right? So here's D right above middle C. Go over to the G and F. Now, you see one ledger line below the staff, the line that's just hanging there all by itself below F. That's middle C. The space below C would be B. The second ledger line would be A, and then the note that they've given us is below that ledger line, which is G. Now, what I've done is I've memorized my ledger lines. One ledger line is middle C. The next ledger line is A, because lines skip, right? You're skipping over B, C, A, and then that note's right below A, so it's G. So that's how you figure it out. Now, if you see it enough, you can memorize it, or you can memorize it now on flashcards, that the space note underneath two ledger lines in the treble clef is G. Mind you, we're using it with our left hand, so there's an added bit of brain challenge to go along with this. So going back to the D and F natural, which, by the way, naturals are always white keys. So if you're seeing D and F there, it's still D and F. The naturals automatically make them white keys. They're reminding us that the D sharp and F sharp are now natural. Now, it's a new measure. They didn't have to remind us, but it does kind of look easier for some of us. Maybe some of us would just be fine, but it is a nice reminder, I'll admit, in this passage. So the 2 and 1 is necessary to get to the 5 and 1 on G and F. And then we're going to end this measure, this line, by going to 2 and 1 on C and E. And guess what? You're back down to a low G on the half note and the quarter note. And then we see the bass clef symbol, which is almost a sigh of relief, because then the rest of the piece is back in bass clef for our left hand. Now, the trick I was talking about. Go back to the beginning of the top line there. F sharp and A. F sharp and A. I'm not going to get into why there's an F sharp and A. It's just part of the song that was written. But F sharp and A, going to the next two notes, F natural and A flat, what do you notice about that movement, that passage on the keyboard itself? So a half step on the keyboard is one note to the very next, I should say, key. This is a half step down. So it doesn't matter if it's white or black. This is a half step up if I go from A to A sharp. So if I'm on F, a half step down would be E, very next key. A half step up from F would be F sharp. So let's go back. F sharp and A. If I take F sharp down a half step, it's F natural, or just F. If I take A down a half step, it's A flat. So I've got F and A flat. Guess what my two next notes are? F and A flat. If I take those down a half step, F down a half step would be E. A flat would be G. And what are my next two notes in the next measure? E and G. If I take those down a half step, E becomes E flat, or let's say D sharp. G becomes F sharp. What are those next two notes? D sharp and F sharp. There it is. And then lastly, in the third measure, take those down a half step, D and F natural, with 1 and 2, of course. So the first 5 half notes are all half step movement. So instead of painstakingly saying, goodness gracious, F sharp and A, gosh, now I'm going to F natural and A flat. Where is that? Once you've figured out the notes, and this goes for all of piano, you need to know how to read notes, because that's the communication. That's the information. That gets you to where you need to be on the piano. But once you figure it out, okay, that's F sharp and A. Okay, there's F and A flat. Once you figure that out, I'm going to say, okay, now how do they relate on the keyboard? Because that's how I'm going to memorize it. That's how I'm going to learn it. They relate by half steps. And how does F and A flat relate to E and G? That's half steps. And then D sharp and F sharp, that's half steps. And then D natural and F, that's half steps. It's still hard because you're going from a black key and a white key to a white key and a black key. But that's also another opportunity to help memorize. So you could say, okay, I'm moving everything by half steps. And by the way, I'm using 1 and 3 now, because 1 and 3, up to here though, up to the D and the F. Because if I stick with 1 and 3 now, you see how that might be easier? Because I get to stick with that same fingering no matter, I'm moving down in half steps, right? So it's just, I keep locked with that fingering and adjust according to the half steps until I get to D and F. That obviously has to be 2 and 1 because of that. But you can also say F sharp and A. Okay, I got a black key and a white key. Now I'm going to go to a white and a black key. Now I'm going to go to all white keys. Now I'm going to go to all black keys. And back to all white keys, changing to 1 and 2. So there's lots of other ways to look at it. The F sharp and A, the F natural, A flat, that's where you start. You've got to be able to read the notes on the staff where they're on the piano. But once you figure that out, figure out how they all relate down here. That's how you actually memorize. Listen to it also. A lot of it's by ear, but by feel. So feel the half steps. Feel the combination of black and white to white and black to both white, both black, both white. There's this alternating pattern, and that's how half steps work. Alternating meaning I've got F sharp and A. Let's flip it around. Black key, white key, let's flip it around. White key, black key. Now, this isn't black key, white key here. It just works out that way. But then when you got E and G, 2 white keys. So it goes down to 2 black keys. Now 2 white keys. See how that works? Except I messed up the fingering. 2 and 1, 5 and 1. Got it? And then the rest of the measure is just notes at that point, pretty much. It doesn't follow that pattern. Now, you got to memorize that pattern on its own before you add the right hand. Because once you add the right hand, it gets hard again. It gets really hard. This is the hardest spot in the piece. But it might click really fast if you start thinking about this pattern. So we'll go with the hands together in a moment, but that's hard. That's going to take a lot of work. Now, at the end of the line, your fifth finger is here on G, and then we go to bass clef. So here's the thing, is that G looks like it's nowhere close to the next 2 notes on the second line, F sharp and A. But it actually is. This G is actually right between the F sharp and A. Now, your 5's on G, you don't have to do this. You can, but it's not very comfortable or fluid. Again, you got pedal down, or you're going to work with the pedal to help. So feel free to lift and move over. But you're definitely going to want 4 on the F sharp and 2 on the A as I suggest. So you got this whole note. Second measure, you've got E and B, so 5 and 1. Right there, feels pretty comfortable. It's right there. Now you're going to extend the pinky a little bit and go to E flat on beat 3. And you're going to extend your thumb up to C. Now remember, those are quarter notes, so you're not going to hold and do that. They're played separately. Now 5 and 1 are going to move down to D and B. On beat 3, you've got the D again, and you're going to use probably 3 and 1 for F sharp and middle C. And then the last measure, extend the hand slightly. Well, not really. You're actually already there. The last measure, D and C. But hold the D, because it's a whole note. So we got 2-part writing again. D and C. You move your well, if you're holding them, you're going to have to move your second finger to A. You see, the third finger could work. It's just extremely uncomfortable. See that stretch I got to do? I would probably just do 2 on A and then move your thumb to B. But you got to hold the D down the whole time. Another sigh of relief, because when you get to the third line, it's like the beginning of the song. 5 on C, thumb on A, 5 on D, 4 and 2 to F and A, and thumb on B, 5 on E, 2 on A, and then extend to D and C with 5 and 1, and then the B and the G, or G and B, 2 and 1. Now I take that back. We did this. 4 and 2, excuse me. You could do the 2 and 1, right? You could do that, but then you're going to bring your thumb over to C, and that's fine. I'm going to suggest the 4 and 2, and then third line, you're just walking down the scale. And then your thumb comes up to D, and it does basically that same pattern twice as fast because it's eighth notes. See how that works? So you got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and... That's a little tricky to get that pinky with the G sharp, but you really have no choice. Thumb on D, 2 on C, 3 on B, 4 on A. So be ready for that. Pinkies and black keys are hard. Small, weak finger hitting a smaller, thinner, higher note is tricky. So be ready for it with really curved fingers. Then you're going to do 3 on... Let's see. I mean, it feels comfortable to go 3 on B. You could do that. And then the next measure, 4 on A, 2 on C, C again, and then 5 on G, 2 on C, C again. Now I have to readjust my hand to F and C. So another alternative, going back to the fourth line, second measure, got to do 5 on G sharp, but what if you squeeze the 2 onto the B? Let's do that. Let's put 2 on B, because what happens after that is going to make so much more sense. A on third finger A, thumb on C. Last measure, 4 on G, thumb on C. And then boom, you're right there for 5 and 1 on F and C on the bottom line. So that's the key. Fourth line, second measure. 5 on G sharp, squeeze 2 to the B. Now you could also put a 2 with a circle, because if I do squeezes like that, something that just feels unnatural, I tend to circle to get my attention. So in the bottom line, we got F and C. Second measure, you got a big jump. That second finger is going to come down to D. Now the reason for that is you got G and F on beats 3 and 4. And you need that second finger to help maneuver the fifth and first fingers to G and F. And then at that point, I would go to 5 on C, just because of what's coming up to the end of the song. Thumb on G, G again, 4 on the D flat. This is a D flat right here. You got G again, and then C and G. And they're going to be played separately because it's part of the roll. So again, you got 2 on D on the second measure, 5 and 1 on G and F. You're going to jump back up to 5 on C, and then thumb on G. Got it? All right, so I haven't spoken too much about rhythms. Now, at this point in the book, you should be really familiar with these rhythms and how they all work out. But a piece like this, where both hands just have so much going on, rhythms almost start making more sense or become a little bit easier when you put the hands together, because then things start to match up. So at the very beginning, so both hands are essentially in the C position, but it's the extended C position. Talked about the right hand, having that layout, and you know your left hand isn't going to G with your thumb, it's extending to A. So both C's hit on beat 1. We got quarter notes, so we got 1 and 2 and. Now, I'm talking rhythm here, but I'm not going to go in tempo yet because I want us to pause and feel the places where both hands come together. Beat 3, right here. So you need to start really, this is how you coordinate hands together. Start to feel the places where the hands come together. Make it comfortable. If it feels odd, hold on to it longer. Play it again and again. Get it to the point where it starts feeling a little more natural. So you've got this A and G right there, but then the right hand goes on by itself. And then this next measure switches. You're bringing 5 to D in the left hand, 2 to G in the right hand. So you want to be really solid with that. You got the crossover to E in the right hand. And then beat 3, we've got, that's a big one, and fingering. You can't just play F and A in the left hand, because if I did that without thinking about it, I would go to 3 and 1, right? And then I'm stuck. I can't get to that B easily. So take the time before you play both hands together, pause, check notes and fingering, and then play it. Okay? Beat 4, we've got B and D together. And now the third measure is kind of like the first measure, but the left hand's on an E. And then you've got A and G again on beat 3. And then we got a lot happening here in the last measure. D and C in the left hand, F and G in the right hand. So like I said, for this piece, don't play it until you've got it all lined up. Don't try to guess. Don't just plow right into it. Don't do this. Well, it looks like I got it, so I don't know what I was trying to prove there. I guess I thought I was... So that spot's maybe not as hard. That comes a little more naturally. Well, I tell you what, if I just did that and didn't move my 5th finger, see, I got to move my 5th finger to D. So it's spots like that. Little moves like that, you got to be careful. So take a moment, check it out, and then play it. So then you ask, well, how do I get it faster? Go from the 3rd measure into the 4th measure again and again. And you'll find it starts getting easier the more you do it. But don't just try to plow into something. Work on getting the hands together, and then you can go into steadier rhythms and all that later. And then ending out this line, you got the G and B. Now, the 2 and 1, like I said, is an option. But if you go to 4 and 2, that makes it easier. And then here we are in the second line, starting with C and E. This is hard because all these notes are moving together. Now, the second fingers are playing together on B and G. So that feels good. But A in the left hand, C in the right hand, 3 and 4, that's a little rough. And then G and E, that's a little rough. So really take your time and line these all up. And then the second measure, you got to adjust. Yeah, not much in the right hand, but a little bit. Make sure all that's together. Now beat 3 is the big one because I got to bring my thumb in the left hand down to B. My 4 crosses over in the right hand. That's a tough spot. And then remember on beat 4, going to F in the right hand, I got to hold this B in the left hand and I'm adding 4. So essentially I got B down and I'm adding D and F. See how that works? Really root that thumb in there so it's not tempted to play again. And make sure your right hand doesn't do this. Because your left hand's doing it, you don't want your right hand holding onto that G. Don't want that. So that's a little tricky. And then everything should kind of be set up for the next measure. Make sure your thumb goes to G in the left hand. And then we'll come back and look at rhythms in a little bit. So there's a lot of coordination here that has to happen first. 3rd line is like the first line. 4th line is like the 2nd line. 5th line is like the 3rd line. 6th line is like the 4th line. 7th line is like the 5th line. 8th line is like the 6th line. 9th line is like the 7th line. 10th line is like the 8th line. 11th line is like the 9th line. 12th line is like the 12th line. 13th line is like the 14th line. 14th line is like the 15th line. 16th line is like the 17th line. 17th line is like the 18th line. 18th line is like the 19th line. 19th line is like the 20th line. 20th line is like the 21st line. 21st line is like the 22nd line. 22nd line is like the 23rd line. 23rd line is like the 24th line. 24th line is like the 25th line. 25th line is like the 26th line. 26th line is like the 27th line. 27th line is like the Make sure you bring the fifth finger up to D in the left hand. Make sure you bring the fifth finger down to D in the left hand. And it's up to you. I'll do the 4 and 2 on the G and the B. Now remember, we changed the fingering in the right hand on the bottom line. So it's thumbs on C and E, and it's 2s on B and G. But then you've got 3 on A and 4 on C. So it's just like the second line, right? Now this measure is different. You start out the same. F in the left hand, A and D in the right hand. But when you go to the B, you add this D, and that's different. And then we got the crossover in the right hand to G sharp, B natural in the left hand. You're going back to the thumb on D, but you're going to go to 4. I think we said 4 on the B in the right hand. And then the next measure, your right hand should fall right into place on that E and C. Make sure you get 3 on the A in the left hand. Middle C in the left hand. Still holding down the right hand in the last measure. Go down to G, C. Now it's just right hand, E with the thumb. Third finger up to C. And your right hand, your left hand is going to come to F sharp and A. So you need to practice this layout. F sharp A, 5 on E. So this is where it's really tricky if you haven't memorized the pattern in the left hand. Okay, so at this point, hopefully you're very comfortable with it. So you got E on beats 1 and 2 in the right hand. And you're going to hit it again on beat 3, and you're going to go to F and A flat. And then we finish up with the right hand. Next measure. So you got E and G in the left hand, B in the right hand. The half note comes in on beat 2. Hold it while you come in on the left hand. And then beat 4, the right hand continues. And both hands. Now, this is the tricky measure because the fingering goes to 2 and 1 in the left hand. Thumb on A in the right hand. C on beat 2. Left hand, G and F on beat 3. B in the right hand on beat 4. And then stay right there on that B in the right hand. In the left hand, you go to C and E on beat 1, and then down to the G on beat 2, 3, and again on 4. Now, going into this fourth line is hard because both hands have a big jump. The left hand jumps to F sharp and A, 4 and 2. The right hand jumps to E and C, thumb and fifth finger. So you need to practice going from here, 2 on B in the right hand, 5 on G in the left hand. Practice going from here to here. And again, if you can do this with your eyes closed, looking away, then you've memorized the jump and the feel. And that's what it's about. It's not about what notes am I going to. It's about what keys am I going to with what fingers. That's how you memorize. So we're here on the second line. Now, a lot of layering going on. You're holding the left hand the entire measure, so you can kind of forget about that. You got this E with your thumb that's on for 2 beats. And so you're going to hit the C again on beat 2, move to D sharp and C on beat 3. Keep holding the D sharp with your thumb when you go to B and A. Now in the second measure, E and B in the left hand, G in the right hand. Hit the half note on beat 2, go down to E flat, beat 3. Now beat 4, your thumb's on middle C in the left hand. Bring your thumb up to G in the right hand. Next measure, this is tricky. D and B in the left hand, G and B in the right hand. So you're going from here. Actually, your right hand's already set up. It's the left hand that jumps. Remember, the right hand has this fingering, but it's all on its own. Make your way up to the B and the D on beat 2, and then hit D on beat 3 in the left hand. You've got F sharp and C. Bring your thumb down to D. So your your thumbs are right up against each other here. And then when you finish it up, all your fingers should be pretty much there. And then a sigh of relief, or release. That sounds good too. Third line down is like the beginning. All of this is exactly the same. Now, the fourth line, remember we did change the fingering as they have printed for the right hand. So it's now C and E with 1 and 2. And then your thumb's going to come under in the right hand for G. So you got B and G. And then A and C. Down to G with the E. Now you're right there for your right hand, but remember your thumb's got to come up to D. Then you got 4 eighth notes in a row. Now again, think about the pattern. You're playing different notes, but you're playing the same pattern in both hands. Every white key just coming down one at a time. So 1 and 2 and remember your left hand, here's what's hard, the G sharp. Thumb on the B in the right hand. Whoops. You go to a B in the left hand and a D in the right hand. In the third measure, A in the left hand, C and E in the right hand. And this is tied for a while in the right hand. So you can finish out your left hand, G, C in the last measure. Now, my fingering didn't work out because, and I didn't write this down, but in the second measure, we said we're going to do the second finger on that B on beat 4 in the left hand. So going into the third measure, it'll look like this. 3 on the A, thumb on C. 4 on the G, thumb on C. Now switch to the 5 on the E in the right hand, and you're going to hit middle C again in the left hand. And remember, now we're going to this A minor chord, A, C, and E. Your left hand's going to F and C. And then your right hand's all that plays in this measure, F, A, C. Now, in the next measure, it's only your right hand doing the roll, not your left hand. So the way this works out is you're going to start the roll just before beat 1 and land both hands together on beat 1. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. See how that works? So, like I said before, this D and this E are together and it's on beat 1. Now I'm not using pedal right now, so you won't hear the notes sustain, but when you use pedal, you will have them sustain. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So you're just making your way down. When you get to beat 3, left hand's on G and F, thumb in the right hand's on A. Squeeze the 4 in the right hand to B. Now you're right there for the right hand on measure 3, but you got to bring your left hand pinky up to C. That C, this E, and this C are all together. And you do 2 and 3, I think we said, on the F and G, 4 on the D flat in the left hand. And the last roll is all 5 notes get rolled. It's probably going to be a slow roll because we're slowing down, getting softer at this point. So that one's easier because, like I said, it's just all 5 notes. It's not trying to time things together like that measure. Okay, so you're going to spend a lot of time just strictly putting the hands together, and I would do that out of tempo. I mean, be aware of where there are eighth notes and where there are whole notes and all. Don't just completely ignore the rhythms and the tempo. But don't worry about being steady. You need to take the time to line things up. And like I said, repeat going into a certain spot again and again and again until it becomes natural. It's not about reading notes and saying what note is that. It's about feeling the movement on the keyboard. That's what helps us memorize things. Now, when we put in the rhythm, like I said, it's pretty basic. I don't think you're going to have any difficulties at this point. And I'm not even going to go over all of it, just a little bit. Like the first line, for example, The thing to remember is just you got eighth notes and then you got really long notes, like whole notes. So you don't want to be rushing some places. So at the very beginning, you just got one and, oops, sorry, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So like that last measure could be actually the hardest measure because it's so easy to just breeze right through that. If you're not counting, you might play it too fast, but it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Another spot to look out for is the last two measures in the second line. So 1 and 2 and 3 and. These half notes can easily just get played over like a quarter note. You could just go. And it doesn't sound bad. It is taking a beat away from each measure, but it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it adds a little bit more rhythm to it. So don't cheat that. When you get to the bottom of page 104, last two measures, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Same thing there. Hold that half note. Now this last measure, nice and steady. You'll want to take your time because this is where you have that big leap, but it's easy to go. It's easy to actually play that like eighth notes and it sounds pretty, but that's not what's written. And two, I don't think you want to go faster in a place where you got to make all these adjustments. So I don't think you have to worry about. Well, we did the coordinations at the top of 105, so that's going to help the rhythm. Like in the second measure. So you have the half note in the right hand on beats 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and. But your left hand comes in on beat 3, so again, that helps coordinate that and make sure you don't rush. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Right here as well. Now this measure, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So my point is there's several measures where there's a half note sort of playing all by itself. It's always in the left hand, it seems like, on beats 2 and 3. Don't rush that half note, okay? Everything else is pretty straightforward with the rhythm. On page 105, the fourth line, last two measures, it's the same deal with that left hand. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and this half note right here, 2 and 3 and. Don't rush that. And then, of course, the bottom line, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Make sure that's on beat 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then here the half note, 1 and 2 and 3 and. Again, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then this is all on 1. And then you can stop counting, of course. So be very mindful of that half note. That sneaks up on us. It's easy to rush, but it's helping create a rhythmic pattern kind of throughout this whole piece. So that brings us down to only two more things, the pedaling and then, of course, the final touches, the dynamics, the smoothness, and all of those nice things that make this piece really come alive. So let's take a moment and let's pull up the pedal camera here and we'll start looking at the pedaling. So the nice thing about the pedaling is that you're already familiar with the pedaling. It's the same basic concept. What makes it a little bit more difficult in this piece is it's used throughout the entire piece and it's used pretty frequently. So they don't give us the chord names anymore. You know, earlier in the book they used to put, you know, if it was a C chord, a G7 or whatever. They don't do that because these are actually pretty complex chords. But the rule still applies that if you have a different chord, you're going to pedal. Or in some cases, if you have notes that are like, you know, minor seconds. Remember at the top of page 105? All these that go down, or half steps, I should say, which is also a minor second. All these half steps, yeah, you got to pedal those. Otherwise, it's going to sound like muck. So at the very beginning, you can have your foot down, because both hands are going to play with the pedal. So, I mean, you can hit all three down at the same time. But I've said before, if you have your foot already down, that's one less thing to have to hit. So Here's your first pedaling. So it's the same concept as review. When the fingers go down, the foot comes up and then right back down. And you're not going to pedal here at the beginning of the second measure. So one would expect that usually at the beginning of measures. But we're still hovering over the same chord. Now you could pedal there and it would be fine. In fact, over pedaling, if you do the pedaling correctly, over pedaling is actually better than under pedaling. In other words, if I don't pedal enough, it'll get real muddy. Now, if I pedal too much, that's not going to make it muddy. That's just more work to do. It's when you don't use any pedal at all, then the music gets real dry. So my point is, if you want to pedal between measures 1 and 2, you can. But you don't have to, and if it's one less thing for you to worry about, then take advantage of, then go for it. So again, at the very beginning, you're going to pedal on beat 3. You're not going to pedal here unless you want to. You're going to pedal on beat 3, beat 4, and beat 1. So a lot more pedaling. Beat 3 on this third measure. Last measure, you're going to pedal on beat 1, 2, and then 3, and 4, and. Now, a lot more pedaling here on the second line. You're going to pedal on beat 1, 2, 3. Almost every beat. I messed up my fingering. And then beat 1 of the next measure. Now you're going to pedal on beat 3. I'm messing up my fingering here. Not on beat 4, but then the next measure. So, wherever you pedal, it's still the same concept, it's just more of it, so be aware of it. Now, third line is like the first line. Make sure you do pedal on beat 1 that time, though, unlike the beginning of the song. Odd thing, they have us pedaling here this time. Very interesting. So, I'd rather us pedal a little too much than not enough, so let's do it. And when you go back to the beginning of the piece, I would pedal there on the second measure. Let's go ahead and do that. Pedal each of these. Now, so I'm on the third line, excuse me. We'll do it one more time. Third line, beginning. Pedal on beat 3. Go ahead and pedal measure 2. On beat 3, beat 4. Now, when you're doing the pedaling, don't feel like you have to be perfectly in time. You can take your time, like right here. You know, if you have to really slow down and say, okay, when I go down with the keys, I come up with a foot and go. So if you need to take your time and pause for that, that's perfectly acceptable. I'd rather you do that than try to, I guess, again, just try to get lucky and plow right through it all. Going down to the bottom line, you're going to pedal beats 1, 2, and 3. Every one of these. But not beat 4. And then you are going to pedal the next measure. And then beats 3, 4, and then the last two measures. Well, third measure, excuse me. Pedal that. And then the fourth measure. And watch my left hand. It's moving up. So that could be right there at the top of the page. Now, everything you play in the left hand here is going to get pedaled. And these are all half steps, so that's why. So pedal here, pedal here, pedal here. Make sure your fingering is good. Pedal here, and on the last measure. But the last measure you can hold. Now going down to the next line, and when I hold my pedal, I can be moving my hands in place and not lose the smoothness, right? So there's the advantage. Still messing up my fingering. So second line, pedal here, pedal on beat 3, pedal on the next measure, pedal here on beat 3, pedal here on the next measure, and again on beat 3, and the last measure. Whoops. I'm really messing up my left hand. And then you want to hit this B because that makes it a little less muddy rather than if we did. Because C and B are a half step apart. So watch this. Hear it? That's muddy. But if I pedal on the B, that's clean. And then the sigh of relief, we're back to the beginning on the third line. And they do have the pedaling mark there on the second measure again, so let's assume that's a mistake at the very beginning of the song. Next line down, pedal everything. Remember the change of fingering. Pedal here for sure, because that G sharp. And then pedal in the third measure. And the fourth measure. My fingering's still off. I need to mark my page. I keep missing that. But let's go on for now. So last line. This whole measure you can hold. Now this is tricky. You can get away with it this time. There are harder situations, which we'll say for another time. Essentially, everything you're playing in measure 1, we talked about this. Actually, everything you're playing in the right hand in measure 1 is the chord in measure 2, right? So, you got your pedal down in that first measure. When you start the roll, it's technically still in that first measure. You could keep holding the pedal down until you get here. So I said earlier that the pedal will hold that out. In this case, it won't if you do that. But that's okay because the roll happens so quickly. Again, it doesn't need to really be held out. Yeah, so I apologize about what I said earlier about if you do, let's see, when you get to the last measure, yes, the pedal is going to hold out the roll. In this case, since you're rolling right before beat 1, technically you will lose it. So sometimes these rolls, you really have to almost analyze them in an individual basis. So I'm not going to be universal about this, but in this case, in this scenario, I'm going to say that you don't have to pedal when you start the roll. Keep holding it down. But when you get here, go ahead and pedal because they want us to pedal because the chord is changing in the left hand, the D. But the fact that it's not carrying that whole roll through is fine. Technically, those are eighth notes, right? Whereas the very last chord of the piece, those are whole notes on the roll. So they're meant to be held out. So I hope that makes sense and it's not too confusing. But my point is, when you get to the end of this measure, do your roll. But right there, when you hit the D and E, that's when you're up and down. Okay, that's tricky. That's going to take some work. So go real slow like this. So you can time that out. Then you're going to pedal on beat 3. Yeah, beat 3. And then pedal on the next measure. And the next to last measure. And then the last measure, when you hit that C, that's where you're going to pedal. So you're going to come, when you go down the C, your foot comes up and right back down, and then you're going to finish that roll. That's tricky too. So if you're worried you're not going to get your foot back down in time, you can hold these down with the fingers. And technically it's a whole note anyways. Got it? So, but that's what I would recommend there. Just hold them down with the fingers. Then you don't have to worry about this. But I can't even do it. I had to get that, up and down so fast. I had to really think about that. But if you just keep your foot down, then you don't have to worry about it. So the last thing are the dynamics, expression. The piece is mostly soft. Mezzo piano on page 1. It's all soft. But if you want some extra credit points, throw in a little crescendo and then diminuendo. So you're following the line in the right hand. Getting louder, getting softer. See that? So when the notes go up and to go down, you're following that with volume. And that just brings it out even that much more. You don't have to do that, but it really sounds really nice when you do that. And this piece is loaded with that opportunity, almost the entire piece. Now, on the very bottom of the page, they do have it written. Now, both hands are kind of expanding there. And then you're pretty loud here. And then we're getting soft. And then this is really soft. And you want to keep that left hand especially really light. Still want that right hand to sing out there. So that's why this is so hard. This line is so hard. It's soft also. So all this that you have to do in the left hand with all these half steps has to be really light. And we still need to hear that melody in the right hand. So it's just a light sort of twinkling effect. It gets slightly louder, but not a whole lot in the second line. Here we're growing. You can kind of trail off here with these a little bit softer. And then mezzo forte. So pretty solid. I like using solid rather than loud because of the nature of the piece. Now on this line you can really get louder. I messed my fingering up. Because this feels like the pinnacle right here. And then suddenly soft. Very sweet. Ritardando, so we're gradually slowing down. And you can maybe almost fermata that right there. And then back to a tempo. So we got movement again. But you can still slow down again and soften up. You got a nice little ending there. But that's something I could add a lot to this piece is follow the line. So when the notes go up, and this is for the right hand, not the left hand, you get louder. When they go down, you get softer. Pretty common theme throughout most music. Follow the line. If notes go up, get louder. If they go down, get softer. And generally that works unless you see printed differently for whatever reasons by the publisher or the composer. So thank you for sticking around with me. It's been a long video, but a really good song. Great arrangement. I'm going to play it all through for you now. Like it would be a performance. I'll put up a separate video, hopefully sooner than later, of just me playing this, so you can access that if you want to hear just the piece being played by itself without the attached lesson. So I'll go ahead and take it from the beginning. I'm going to give it a little count off in case you want to play along at this point. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let me start that again. I didn't pedal. That's not a good start. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Yeah, so it's a really nice arrangement, and I hope you agree with me on that. This is really, gosh, one of my favorite arrangements in this whole book. A wonderful, wonderful piece for Christmas. Again, I had a student who performed this on a recital just this past Christmas and did an excellent job. And yeah, it's a great arrangement. Now, it's probably, again, one of the hardest arrangements in this book, and it's not going to come easy. But it's very accessible, of course. And again, great music. So it's wonderful. One of the things I like about this book, you're still on level one and you're already playing really, really well arranged tunes. Well, as always, I hope this lesson has been very helpful for you. There's a lot of details to cover. It's getting more complicated all the time. And as you noticed, if you were really paying attention, I wasn't always using the correct fingering. I'll be completely honest with you. I was a finger rebel when I was a kid. I did not want to follow fingering. I followed everything my teacher said except fingering. And here I am years later, a teacher myself, and I'm pretty strict about fingering. But I've learned that even though I ignored it for so long, I learned the importance of fingering, that fingering and notes go hand in hand, so to speak. And to get the notes, and specifically we talked about memorizing on the keys, fingering is such a huge component of that. So it's not just a matter of just like, you're supposed to have this finger just because the music says, and it's an assignment and you got to do what it says. No, there's logic behind it, and it sets you up for what's to come. Now, that being said, I've learned to work my way around fingering so much because I was such a rebel as a kid. Now, I'm not going to teach people to do that, of course. And I wish my fingering was a little bit better when I perform, but I do use things like pedal to kind of hide that. Now, if this piece didn't have pedal, I'd probably be in trouble. But that pedaling, which is one of the reasons I love piano, not only makes the instrument sound so nice, but you could cheat a little bit. So I'm just throwing that out there because I want you to know that I too make mistakes. I'm not perfect after all these years, and I want you to realize that it's hard stuff. But stick with it. Again, let me know how it's going in the comments. I appreciate all your feedback. Just looking forward to the next lesson, which we'll do shortly, and we'll be jumping right into book 2. All right, all the best, and thanks again. See you next time.